Good afternoon and welcome to episode 14 of Will You Review My CV? I'm your host, Alan Wozni, and today I want to highlight two career advice submissions I made on LinkedIn back in May 2019. One is a food production manager based out of Portland, Oregon, and the second is an administration executive based out of Waterloo, Ontario, here in Canada. I want to jump right in. I want to jump right into the PowerPoint presentation I prepared, which outlines the responses I made to the job search appeals that these individuals made on the pages of LinkedIn, the two LinkedIn influencers, Bridget Hyacinth and Oleg Vishnopolsky. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump right into this. Here we go. And I'll go from the start. Okay. So the two career advice, so I numbered them as I've done in past as the number 117, Chris Carrruthers. He's a food production manager in Portland, Oregon. And a career advice number 122, which not long after each, the one from Chris, was to Marlene Coulter, administration executive out of Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. So let's look at first at Chris. So on the 8th of May, 2019, I came across from his post that comment that he had submitted through Bridget Hyacinth. I need a job. I've been unemployed since December 2018 when the company I worked for closed its doors or their doors. I've applied a ton of positions and a few interviews, but I'm still looking. My unemployment will be gone in 2 months and I'm worried about this. So this is, I think Clackamas is somewhere near Portland, Oregon. All right. I wanted to give an idea for anyone looking at it. So Chris, looking at his profile today, is very similar to what I would have looked at back then. I would have looked at his profile, kind of see to put to relevancy. Computer science degree, 2000. So he's been working for a number of years, and variety of production manager roles. And I think he was even a sous chef at one point. We're going to come across that in an example. I'm going to talk about some of the examples, but variety of manager roles, and then he went back into production manager, plant supervisor for a food distribution company. So that's the current. And so let's look back what I said to Chris at the time. Now I missed out. There's a point here. I wanted to say this is the fact that he was job interviewing. There's some. I didn't give any comments or feedback on job interviews, but I have some ideas on that. But I won't go into it today. So what I looked at, first thing I said, Chris, go look at AngelList. There's a number of tech and non-tech startups that are in your area. There are 100, at that time, there were 107 open roles in Oregon and 94 in Portland. So that's AngelList. And I've said this in past episodes. AngelList can be a great source of non-tech, tech roles, of course, with computer coders, but there's a lot of non-tech roles to help support. So his business background is his business. He's been a manager for many years. That could help. And then I looked at the Portland startup scene, and again, I go to Strictly VC, TechCrunch newsletters, and some examples I gave back then. And Fanny's cleaning and pest control products, Wild Friends, Nut Butter Startup. I mean, he works in food production, so there's some of these that could actually work with things could translate across or transcend across. Circle Media Labs helps parents monitor child screen time. Orchestra, a software for craft beverage industry. Now, again, that's probably, maybe kombucha, maybe it's beer, maybe it's non-alcoholic beers, but the craft beverage industry is boomed in the last, I don't know how many years. At least I've had several on my podcast. But so his food production, his knowledge of that could translate into awareness of the craft beverage industry if he studied it. And a company called Socrates Hemp Genetics, cannabis has been big. This was 2 years ago. Cannabis field has been, is growing, and particularly with psychedelics and so forth. And then Ask Nicely, consumer or customer experience platform. So these were all startups in Portland, based in Portland back in 2019. I also gave him some examples of job placement and career planning websites. As I've said on past episodes of this channel, Average Talent, Career Arc, Convey, IQ, Zippia, and Teamable. So those are quite common. I don't think there's anything new. As I said in the previous episode, To me, those were really new because I've been overseas, and the only ones I was ever familiar were with Yahoo Jobs and Monster. Kind of, these were kind of new sites, and they're pretty cool. Um, and then I went to I like these ones, the temporary worker sites like Spur, hourly. They just, if you're looking for hourly gigs, Jive, short term, Jit Jat Joe. So they're for hospitality staff. So he's been in the food industry. He's worked at it as a sous chef for 3 years. If you look at his profile, and then InstaWork, restaurant and hospitality. So those are really relevant to his background in the food industry, hospitality. Chit Chat Joe's kind of cool. I mean, it's to place restaurant workers on short-term gigs across the landscape. It's mostly in North America, mostly in the U.S. at the time. And then I went and focused on small business SaaS to connect with his, again, back to his experience working small businesses as a manager. Stored, next generation warehouse and distribution, ShipMonk, back office support for order fulfillment and shipping, Canvas analytics, predictive analytics for industrial IoT. So he's worked in food production. So that's relevant to some of the stuff he's done. And then there's Augury. Augury is really cool. And I came across this a couple of years ago, and they have an artificial intelligence to assess the health of machines and equipment. So basically, it gets in and it does diagnostics right on. I don't know how that works exactly, but I can imagine if you feed it data on the machine performance, it's going to spit back. So it gets into your system basically, and then looks at the health of the machines, which is pretty cool. And then there's Flow Space, warehouse and fulfillment software. So these are just some ideas to bound. This isn't a complete list. It was just information at a given time, and which I tried to present to Chris in his job search. And then the other, I came up with an action plan just to have a little bit of fun. You know, set a search agent. First of all, go to search agent, set a search agent up in Angel List, just to create so you get feeds of jobs in your area that are being come up. And I say this all the time: startups need experienced people, and they don't always use the normal recruiting sites, and the founders, they're busy, they're full on laser focused on their startup, so they could use people with experience. Chris is graduated in 20s. He's in 2000. He's 10 years younger than me, so he's got more time to go in, but he's got a lot of experience. And I just say learn relevant SaaS. So then reach out to founders. uh, I said to 21, 42, or all 94 from the listed on the angel list. Reach out to them and say, hey, I'm here looking. I mean, I don't know. It's the rejection could be high. I don't know. And then I said, learn the relevant SaaS that the businesses that you're gonna talk to. Get the free demo. Download the newsletter. Follow them on social media. And then the last idea I gave actually, there's more. It was an idea, a freelance idea, based upon his 3 years plus that he worked as a sous chef in one of the restaurants in Portland. Go to some of those SaaS examples around food and restaurants. Prepare an executive summary report, and just prepare that report and send it to the different SaaS companies. So here's some of the examples that that because he's a food guy, food industry, which COVID, you know, COVID now talks about some of these ones are really important. So back then, here's some examples I gave: Easy Cater, order catered food from restaurants. Hungry connects independent chefs with businesses and events catering. Now, COVID, those would have shut down, but people had their private homes. They probably catered boxed, bulk size groceries. That again during COVID, very important. The people getting groceries shipped to the home. So these 2 years ago, pre-COVID, if he had did a deep dive into this, he probably could have been quite made a name for himself. Chow Bus, online food ordering for independent restaurants. Again, very important during COVID. And then Simply Cook. Now, these are websites. These are websites that existed 2 years ago. I came up with these based on his background. So this is kind of the freelance idea. This was based on his background as a prior sous chef and his working in the food production industry. And then Simply Cook. So recipe boxes with only flavor ingredients. So I think there's several now doing that. They just send a bunch of recipes to your or ingredients to your home, and you make from the recipes. Then I suggest to prepare a one-page report on those, for the owners, restaurant owners in Portland. Just write the report and send it to 79 different restaurant owners in Portland based on his experience, his knowledge, and what he thinks is important to them. Then reach out to the SaaS founders, executives to that the final idea. So those ideas, Easy Catering, Hungry Box, reach out to the founders of those companies and say, look, I'll represent you in Portland. I'll just go and, I'll go out and reach out to these 79 startups and I'll be your official representative. So that was my ideas back in May 2019. All right. So what would I do differently today if I had the chance of looking at Chris? I mentioned interview and I didn't send it here, but if he's are into interviews, if you look at the interviews landscape, you could Google the word interview or job interview or weaknesses and strengths and weaknesses, and there are probably hundreds of millions of that's going to come back at you. So active interviewing, just learning about that. I wanted to touch on that a bit, but it's something I'll go in future is give ideas on that because it's a company, Eric Kramer, who's produced a book called Active Interviewing. But I want to touch on some of the three key points I made here, three or four key points. So if I was going to go back, COVID. Ironically, food delivery was key during COVID. At the same time, traditional restaurants were hit hard by the pandemic. So they're just opening up now across North America, maybe some places in Europe. So, it could have been a catch 22. If he went hard into the industry, you don't know where he could have fallen out on that one. He works for a food production company today. So it's key because food is the supply chain is very key in the food industry. The other was, there's a podcast I did just pre-COVID with Alex Sulkin out of a company here in Calgary called EOT Technologies. And what Alex managed to do is take sensors and put it to the food production industry. And what he did, he was in Techstars, I believe, out in Minnesota, and he was presenting his ideas on sensors and how they can be used in industrial applications. And someone from a major food company came to him and said, "Look, we've got problems we get a lot of the food's being spoiled. There's contaminants getting into our food that they're making. I can't remember what it was, but massive conveyor belts. Can you help us out?" So they put sensors all around the conveyor belts, and they detected a slight movement in the conveyor belt. So the sensors and that slight movement was causing metal shavings to fall into the fresh food, and it contaminated the food. So the metal was, whatever was happening to the food. So that's a new thing that he went from just sensors, off the shelf sensors, to making them very specific to the food industry. And that's relevant to what Chris is doing today at Food Supply, the company he works for in Portland. And then Gary Vaynerchuk, go to the Midlife. There's a podcast episode he featured the founder of the Midlife Wisdom School. And it's actually pretty cool. So people in their 45 to 65 year age, where there's no safety nets or supports, and suddenly they just found without a job. And this was pre-COVID, but that's it's common. COVID was probably even worse. And so the Midlife Wisdom School focuses on how to give people some tools and ideas to further their career, taking the experience they've had from the last 20, 30, 40 years and applying it to today's market. The other, because he's from Portland, there was a podcast I listened to, the Schmidt's Originals, the Portland-based natural deodorant. The founders of Jamie Schmidt and Chris Cantino were featured on the Gray Matter podcast. Now, they sold to Unilever in 2017, and they were covered before they sold. I think they started in 2012, 2013. But before they sold to Unilever, they were covered 14,000 stores, their products across 30 countries. So that's right in his neighborhood, right in Portland. And then the last thing, just as I was researching to find some ideas for Chris, in the current market, there was literally on May 26th, there was a funding for Clear Labs, and they're literally just in food safety, helping companies in the food production industry help with food safety. And they raised 27 million for their startup or their innovation. So that I couldn't find any others, but they come up from time to time for articles like this one. So just because I was looking for what was happening in Portland, I wanted to find some examples of startups. There's continued innovation in his community. Smith's Originals, Smith's Naturals is not really a startup. They've sold off to Unilever, but Portland startups continue to innovate. the recent funding announcements, that's so the 26th of May, where I found the food safety company Clear Labs, Reclaim.ai. They raised 4.8 million for their calendar assistance. Pretty cool tech. Pretty cool tech. I mean, Calendly is one company that's invested in Reclaim AI, and it's a cool calendar. They're using artificial intelligence. April 7th of this year, Brave Care, this is in Portland, they raised $10 million for their pediatric healthcare platform. Not necessarily related to what he's doing, but just again, it's to highlight the fact that there are Portland-based startups. The community is quite robust. February 5th, Power and Energy raised $100 million for their battery and energy storage facility. And then 3rd of February, 2021, Edify raised a seed money, 1.6 million for onboarding engineers. So this is software engineers. It's a platform for companies that are hiring them to help them to bring them on board. So this is an early stage company in his right in Portland. I don't know how many, I don't know the population of Portland. I should check that just to put that in perspective. 4 companies in the space of 3 months, 4 months. Okay, let's switch gears. We'll go over to Marlene Coulter. Marlene is administration executive out of Waterloo, Ontario, here in Canada. And on 10th of May, I came across the comments she submitted to Oleg on the page of LinkedIn influencer Oleg Vishnopolsky. I am seeking a role as an executive assistant to partner with a great executive. So pretty general, pretty broad. All right, so I went to her profile to look at Marlene. She, for a number of years, she's worked as executive and administrative assistant in a variety of roles from 2005 to currently. So that's over the last 15 years or so. But if you look further, her education, she graduated, looked like as in a diploma in 1992, and then a network specialist diploma in 2001. So she's got some skills and worked many years. So she brings to the table in my view, the years of experience. Going back to the midlife wisdom, she's bringing that wisdom to the table to any company she works for. So here's what the heart of my advice. Look at Waterloo. For me, it's the heart of Canadian tech industry. You know, BlackBerry was there first, RIM with the BlackBerry, and now there's Shopify, and there's probably many. This is in addition to outlined examples of startups. I also outlined several startups in the Waterloo region, but to me, those are the benchmarks, the Shopify and everything else that comes from, Waterloo, Ontario. The next thing I talked about is I recommend she goes to AngelList. And again, I've said startups tend to keep it lean. So people with experience, particularly her experience, she's got back office experience, administrative support. Startups need that kind of support, and they're not going to go out to the recruiting agencies. They're just going to, if people are there, her kind of experience could really play well for a startup who needs someone who can just get things done. Anyway, so summary of Canadian startups that are listed with open roles on the site back in 2019, across Canada, 1,200 startups listed on the site. Today, I just checked it today, there are currently 1,500 plus startups with open roles across Canada on AngelList. In Ontario, 717 back in May 2019. Today, that's increased to 845. Early COVID, those numbers were much below. I don't have the comparison, but last year, COVID, all the numbers were down at least 50% across AngelList, but they're now picking up. Toronto, 632 back in May 2019, and today 741. So that's tech startups, tech and non-tech roles. And then in Waterloo, 40 companies listed open roles. Now they're 38. So it's about the same. I don't know if I think Kitchener, I looked at Kitchener, which is the two cities are kind of twin cities, Kitchener, Waterloo. I think there's around 19 currently across that. I don't know if, how those roles in 2019, if there was some kind of a mix up, they were separate, sorry, not mix up, if they were separate. But anyway, there's still enough startups in the community today in Waterloo. It's a small city, so, okay. The other thing I recommended, because of her seniority and because of she's executive experience, understanding that startup role, I gave examples for, in addition to AngelList, I gave her examples of venture capital companies in Canada. Now, venture capital companies, as I've said, that when you go to their portfolio, you go to the list of investments in any venture capital, they usually have a link to the startups within their portfolio and or the companies within their portfolio. And to me, it's like a kid in a candy store. You come and just all this color and symbols, and it's a fantastic place to go and visit, like a kid in a candy store. And I look at that because there's a pure opportunity to just help those startups or some of those companies, because when they receive funding from VCs, they usually go for help us scale, marketing companies, technical staff, support staff to help us scale. So like AngelList, they don't always go to the normal recruiting job sites, and they're scaling, companies scale. So they focus, laser focused. So someone with her background, Marlene's background in support and back office could really play out well. So some VC examples in Canada I gave to her: BDC Capital, Brightspark Ventures, Bumblebees, Manulife Capital, Next Canada, and Version One. Version One's kind of cool. If you go into there was recently, I get their newsletter, but they created a startup handbook back in November 2019. If you drill down, but this is how to help, how to help startups. So again, I haven't looked a deep dive into that. I didn't do a deep dive into that itself, that the handbook, but imagine the startups could, imagine they go to the point of getting support and having, how to help, how to do fundraising, how to do pitch presentations, how to just do things, and Marlene's got the experience. She could probably add value to startups. So back then, I gave examples of Kitchener-Waterloo tech startups: Acorn Biolabs, Darwin AI, Avid Bots, Bridget. I think Bridget is it's a construction startup or shipping logistics. I don't know. I should have looked into these ones, but again, they're just startups in the community. And if I was living in the community, I'd want to get to know who they are and what they do, just for interest sake. But specifically, how can I help them? If I was Marlene, how can I help them? And then, of course, the giving uh, career advice or career planning links landed in Fairy Godboss. For women, they're very focused on women. If you go to their Instagram handle, at least Fairy Godboss, kind of fun. They have a lot of fun there, and they provide a lot of tools to women and job seekers. And then Career Arc, Zippia, Teamable, the standard ones I've been providing. Back then, I gave them all the time back in May 2019, or back in 2019. I was always referring to the recruiting sites in my early submissions. And then my suggested action plan for Marlene, not a lot different than Chris in Portland. Go to AngelList, set up your site profile, set up search agents for the jobs you're looking for. Then make an outreach to businesses or founders in your area, 22, 47, or go reach out to all 717 across Ontario. There's a lot of startups in there. It'd probably take a long time, but reach out to the founders and say, hey, wave your flag. Marlene, years of experience. She's written it. I want to be an executive to help executives be better. Um, get small business SaaS. Just become aware of it, because how can it help? I mean, I don't know what the company she's worked for. It's constantly changing. Some small businesses, finance, accounting, marketing, legal, whatever it is. And that's the examples I gave here. Some examples. Become aware of it to help her role. Not, I don't know what she does on a day-to-day basis, but I can imagine it's helping people with contracts like Evisort, Disco. It's a legal software. I mean, I don't know if she's working for a legal company or a legal lawyer. Leapwork, automate repetitive tasks. So Pilot, automated bookkeeping. Airbase, spend management. She's probably working for an executive. He's probably traveling, or he's got money. He's got, Marlene, go ahead and, input these into the system for me, like expenses, shoebox full of expenses. Workable. They help companies with recruitment. I see them all the time. When you get job links, career advice, when you look at career advice, when you on LinkedIn, it says click on the LinkedIn to apply for this job. It's usually Workable or someone like Workable. Shipmonk, ordering and shipping. Small businesses, startups, helping automating some of the processes of ordering, regular repetitive tasks. All right. So Marlene, if I was to go back and look at hers, and she's working, and that's terrific. But if I was, to go back today, I'd go back to that midlife wisdom school, the Gary Vaynerchuk, and he the founder of the Midlife Wisdom School. I don't remember the name. I don't have it, but in that bracket, you've been working for a long time. You have a lot. I believe you have a lot of value to provide. So, age 45 to 65, where there are no safety nets or supports. Um, Again, innovation in the region, Waterloo, Kitchener, Waterloo. But I just went into the Waterloo and found. I think she just needs to. I would double down on creating awareness of start my own personal awareness. If I was in Waterloo, man, the Shopify is kind of the RIM and the BlackBerry, but they're gone. BlackBerry's kind of gone now. But find out. I would double down to find out make great awareness of what's happening in the startup community. Recent funding amounts that I found, or recent funding announcements that I found in Waterloo, 15th of June, company called Vivish, just last month, Skywatch, they raised 17 million for a data management platform for Earth observation companies. So satellites, right? Think satellites, companies that got satellites up there, and there's data that comes around that. They're there to help that. They're there to bring the data and make sense of it for customers. 11th of June, 2021, Fair raised $260 million for its online wholesale marketplace. Um, Shopify. I imagine there's a link to Shopify. The guy, one of probably one of the number 20 employee of Shopify probably went and started Fair. I don't know. 9th of February, 2021, Cave Low, 1.3 million. It's a startup, 1.3 million for a cybersecurity platform. So, it's another startup. 1.3 million seed. I think they're seed or pre-seed. But these companies are out there. So they need help. They need support. All right. So I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to go back to, I want to just go back here. Job search. One of the main reasons I started providing career advice on LinkedIn is the rejection or the lack of success I found in my own job search. It is tough. It is tough. It's tough not hearing back from recruiters and HR managers, not getting a response to your job application. That's difficult to accept for pretty much anyone. Getting rejected after having an interview or maybe a series of interviews that can easily deflate your job search activities. Startups, Angel List, the local community. I talked about it in Portland. I talked about it in Waterloo. For both of these job seekers, they both have a startup community that seems to be quite robust. And the recent funding announcements confirm that. It's ongoing. It doesn't just stop 5 years ago, 3 years ago, innovation stops. But those are public announcements. The ones I highlighted were public announcements. The public, first of all, they weren't complete list. Those are just what it was a snapshot. But those are public announcements. Imagine the sheer number of small business startups that exist in both Portland and in Waterloo that do not make such public announcements. Think of it. Imagine further the companies that are just running successful businesses that either self-funded it, they approach family and friends to get them off the ground, or they just bootstrap their businesses by the revenues they built on the revenues from their existing customers, the customers they had when they started their business. Both Chris from Portland and Marlene from Waterloo, they have years of experience that could likely transfer across to many of those startups, whether they're publicly announcing these or they're just in the community. Whether the companies these startups are technical in nature and they just need backup support, it doesn't matter. Reaching out to founders and startups, it's not easy. No different than sending to recruiters or HR managers. Reaching up to there's going to be a ton of rejection in that approach as well. I just say it takes time. You have to start somewhere. Retooling, repivoting, re-educating. I think the Midlife Wisdom School is an amazing idea for job seekers. The philosophy of the school is to help people grow whole, not old. So the focus is on, and if you listen to the podcast with Gary Vaynerchuk, and they just literally talk about how, taking those years of experience and finding innovative ways to use that, startups could use that years of experience to help them build their business. There's a company called Guild Education. I think their focus on getting employers to pay for updated education for the existing workforce, this is a terrific benefit. This is a terrific benefit. So if you get trained while working, it'll have long lasting, while working for anybody, it'll have long lasting implications. So this company's called Guild Education. I recall working in Kazakhstan with Deloitte, and we had talent management or employee discussions, and some of the partners would reject the idea of sending staff away for a 1 year exchange. Yeah, somewhere it was very common in the 90s. It was very common. One of my partners, before that he'd gone to Seattle and worked for 1 year and then came back to Kazakhstan. Well, the idea that to send them away, they would reject that idea because either to Europe or to the United States or to Canada. And, they would say, what if they don't come back? Azamat, obviously, Azamat, he had come back and he was an example of where that worked, but not all of them come back. But there's a post on social media that these days that reflects this exact same sentiment. What if we pay for the specialized training for our staff and they leave? And the response to that is, what if we don't provide such specialized training and they stay? To paraphrase the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, I get that wrong if I pronounce that wrong. Give a job seeker a lead. You help them once. Give a job seeker a set of tools to improve their approach. You help them over their lifetime. Have a great day, and thanks for listening. Have a great day and stay safe.